Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you stop explaining yourself to people who were never listening, your life begins to change. The day you choose silence over noise, focus over distraction, and peace over approval, everything around you starts to shift. Most people spend their whole lives shouting for attention, but the ones who rise, the ones who truly win, are the ones who learn to move in silence. Because when you focus on yourself and stay quiet, the world has no choice but to notice. When you reach that point when your silence begins to speak louder than your words, you realize that your power has never come from being seen or heard, but from being grounded. True power is not about dominance. It's about control over your emotions, your reactions, your thoughts, and your energy. The quiet individual is not weak, they are simply unshakable. They no longer allow every gust of wind to sway them. They stand firm, rooted in purpose, steady in direction. In that silence, you begin to feel a shift. You become more deliberate with your thoughts because you finally understand that what you think about consistently, you become. The human mind is a remarkable instrument, capable of creating beauty or chaos depending on how it's directed. When you stop filling it with distractions and negativity, you open space for creativity, inspiration, and discipline. You start shaping your reality through the quiet repetition of right thoughts, right actions, and right focus. You'll notice that as your inner world changes, your outer world begins to rearrange itself to match it. People who drain your energy will fade away. Situations that once frustrated you will lose their grip, and doors that were once closed will begin to open. It's not magic, it's alignment. When you align your focus with your purpose, the universe responds in kind. But this kind of growth demands solitude. It demands time away from noise, from comparison, from the endless consumption of opinions. Growth happens in the unseen moments, in the early mornings when no one's watching, in the late nights when you're still working, still learning, still becoming. That's where transformation takes place, in the spaces between distractions. When you stay quiet, you gain something that most people have lost: patience. In a world obsessed with instant results, patience is almost a superpower. It's the ability to stay consistent when progress seems invisible. It's the faith to keep watering seeds even when you can't yet see the harvest. And it's in that quiet patience that greatness is built. Every successful person you've ever admired learned this, that while others were chasing recognition, they were chasing mastery. They were focusing on improving their craft, understanding their mind, and perfecting their discipline. They weren't loud about it. They didn't need to be. The results eventually revealed everything, and the same will happen to you when you decide to focus on yourself and stay consistent in silence. You start to realize that quietness sharpens your awareness. You begin to see the patterns of your own behavior, the moments you waste, the excuses you repeat, the comfort you cling to. And when you see it clearly, you can finally change it. Self-awareness is the first step to self-mastery. You cannot improve what you refuse to notice. This journey is not about isolation, it's about elevation. You distance yourself not because you don't care, but because you do. You care about your peace, your progress, your purpose. You care enough to protect your energy from the trivialities that once consumed you. You learn that you don't need to attend every argument you're invited to, and you don't need to justify every move you make. You simply move in silence, knowing that clarity doesn't need approval. There comes a moment when you realize that silence is a teacher. It teaches you discipline because it's easier to talk about goals than to work toward them quietly. It teaches you humility because you learn that true growth doesn't need an audience. And it teaches you resilience because silence forces you to rely on yourself, to find strength in your own conviction when there's no applause and no validation. In focusing on yourself, you begin to rediscover something you may have forgotten: your own potential. You remember that you are capable of far more than the limits you once accepted. You remember that you are the only one responsible for your growth, your happiness, your success. And you begin to act like it. You stop blaming circumstances, stop waiting for motivation, and start building momentum through action. Quiet, steady, unstoppable action. As you evolve, you'll see that life itself starts to quiet down. The drama fades, the distractions lose power, and peace becomes your normal state. You don't chase it anymore, you embody it. And from that place of peace, you make better decisions. You see opportunities more clearly. You attract the kind of people and circumstances that reflect your new frequency. The quiet mind is powerful because it's free, free from the opinions of others, free from the past, free from the endless noise of self-doubt. And when your mind is free, your life expands. You become more deliberate with your words, more thoughtful with your choices, more intentional with your days. You no longer wake up reacting to life. You start creating it. You also begin to understand that not every battle is worth fighting. Some things are best left alone, not because you're avoiding them, but because you've outgrown them. When you focus on yourself, you stop seeking revenge and start seeking peace. You stop competing with others and start competing with your former self. You understand that the only true victory is self-improvement, becoming better, wiser, and more disciplined than you were yesterday. In this silence, your vision sharpens. You begin to think long-term. You stop seeking quick wins and start building a foundation that will last. You trade impulse for intention, distraction for direction. You realize that life isn't about doing everything, it's about doing the right things consistently. There's a kind of maturity that comes with silence, the kind that no amount of talking or convincing can achieve. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're walking your own path, regardless of who notices. It's the calm that comes from no longer needing to prove anything. You no longer need to tell people you're working, they'll see it in the results. You no longer need to announce your plans, the outcomes will speak for themselves. And though the journey may feel lonely at times, you start to realize that solitude is not emptiness, it's refinement. It's in the silence that you refine your goals, refine your mindset, refine your habits. Every day becomes a quiet act of devotion, a commitment to becoming the best version of yourself. The more focused you become, the less you seek distractions. You stop consuming endless content and start creating it. You stop being influenced by others and start influencing yourself. You understand that everything you feed your mind becomes the seed of your future. So you become careful about what you consume, what you think, and who you spend time with. And something extraordinary begins to happen. You start to attract peace instead of chaos, purpose instead of confusion, growth instead of stagnation. Your silence becomes magnetic. People begin to notice something different about you, a calm strength, a quiet confidence, a presence that doesn't need words to be felt. When you focus on yourself, you also discover gratitude. You stop rushing for the next achievement and start appreciating how far you've come. You learn that happiness isn't found in noise, but in awareness, in recognizing the beauty of progress, the peace of solitude, the miracle of growth. Gratitude keeps you grounded, humble, and aligned. It reminds you that every quiet step forward is still movement, still progress, still victory. In your silence, you realize that life was never meant to be a constant chase. It was meant to be a creation. The moment you stop trying to impress others and start impressing yourself, everything changes. You move differently, you think differently, You carry yourself differently, because now you're not living to be seen, you're living to be fulfilled. And as this transformation unfolds, you'll understand why focusing on yourself and staying quiet was never about retreating from the world. It was about mastering it, beginning with the world within you. The world of thoughts, emotions, discipline, and belief. Once you master that inner world, the outer one aligns effortlessly. There will come a time when people will wonder how you did it, how your life changed so drastically, how you became so grounded, so focused, so at peace. But you'll know the truth. It wasn't luck. It wasn't noise. It was silence. It was focus. It was the decision to turn inward, to stop talking about change and start becoming it. Because when you finally focus on yourself and stay quiet long enough to hear your own thoughts, you realize that you were never waiting for a miracle. You were becoming one. And as you continue to grow in that silence, you begin to notice that life starts responding to you differently. The very same world that once seemed chaotic and uncertain begins to reveal an order that was always there. It's as if the moment you stop shouting at life and start listening, it begins to speak to you in a language only you can understand. Every setback starts to look like preparation, every delay begins to make sense, and every disappointment reveals itself as direction. You begin to understand that life was never happening to you, it was responding to your state of mind all along. You see, when your mind is quiet, you can finally hear the subtle messages that chaos used to drown out. The lessons, the signs, the small opportunities, they were always around you, but you couldn't see them while you were caught up in noise. When you turn down the volume of the world, the truth has room to enter. And that truth, once it takes root, changes everything. You start to see that peace isn't something you find, it's something you create. It's the natural result of alignment when your thoughts, words, and actions begin to move in the same direction. You stop living in conflict with yourself. You stop saying one thing and doing another. You stop promising change and start embodying it. This is where quiet focus becomes power, because it's no longer just discipline, it's identity. You are no longer trying to become someone better. You are simply being that person, moment by moment, silently, consistently. The quiet life is not a dull one. It's not about isolation or indifference. It's about intensity without chaos. It's about being fully engaged with what matters, without being distracted by what doesn't. It's about learning that peace and ambition can coexist. You can chase greatness without noise, achieve success without shouting, and live boldly without explanation. The quiet individual isn't running away from the world, they're operating on a higher frequency within it. And the more you live this way, the more you realize that true success doesn't demand attention, it commands it naturally. People are drawn to those who have found peace within themselves because peace is rare. In a world where everyone is trying to be seen, the one who moves calmly, purposefully, and silently becomes magnetic. Their very presence speaks louder than any words could. As your focus sharpens, you begin to respect time differently. You understand that time is not just something to spend, it's something to invest. Every moment of quiet work compounds. Every hour of learning, of self-reflection, of deliberate effort builds towards something unseen. You begin to move with intention, and in doing so, you separate yourself from the masses who drift aimlessly from one distraction to the next. The quiet person isn't idle, they're simply too busy building to broadcast. You learn that silence builds confidence, because when you no longer rely on others to validate your direction, your steps become surer. You stop seeking permission to dream. You stop asking for confirmation to move. You start trusting your instincts again, and every time you follow that inner voice, it grows stronger. Eventually, that inner guidance becomes unshakable a compass you can rely on no matter how uncertain the path appears. There is great strength in this kind of focus. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's enduring, the kind of strength that keeps building even when no one is watching, the kind that doesn't need motivation because it's driven by vision, the kind that doesn't need applause because it's fueled by purpose. That is the strength of the quiet mind. It doesn't fade when attention fades, because it never depended on attention in the first place. And soon you begin to notice that you no longer crave the things you once did. The approval, the recognition, the competition, they lose their pull. You start valuing peace more than praise. You realize that you can be content and ambitious at the same time, that wanting more for your life doesn't mean being restless, and being calm doesn't mean you've settled. True fulfillment, you discover, is not found in having everything. It's found in knowing you're aligned with what matters most. When you focus on yourself and stay quiet, you also start to understand others better. You listen differently. You hear not just their words, but their intentions, their fears, their emotions. You develop empathy, patience, understanding, qualities that come only from stillness. Because when you are no longer consumed by your own noise, you have the space to perceive others clearly. The quiet person becomes wise, not because they know everything, but because they see everything without the distortion of ego. In the silence of focus, your discipline deepens. You stop negotiating with excuses. You stop seeking comfort in procrastination. You realize that consistency is not a mood, it's a decision. Every day you choose to show up for yourself, even when it's difficult, even when no one notices, even when progress feels invisible. Because you understand that the quiet work you do in private will one day become the loudest proof of your commitment. You will also learn that stillness doesn't mean the absence of struggle. In fact, sometimes it's during your quietest seasons that the greatest battles are fought. Doubt, fear, impatience, they all rise to the surface when you stop drowning them with distraction. But here's the truth, facing them is how you defeat them. When you meet your fears in silence, you rob them of power. You begin to see that fear was never as big as it seemed. It only looked that way because you kept running from it. In these moments of quiet confrontation, you grow stronger. You learn that strength isn't the absence of emotion, but the ability to master it. You stop letting your feelings dictate your actions. You still feel doubt, but you move anyway. You still feel uncertainty, but you act anyway. You realize that courage doesn't roar, it whispers. And often, it whispers in the quiet moments when no one else is around to hear it. The longer you walk this path, the more you understand that peace is not a destination, it's a practice. It's something you choose over and over again. You protect it fiercely because you know how much it cost you to find it. You no longer give easy access to your energy. You no longer explain your boundaries. You no longer feel guilty for choosing yourself, because you've learned that you cannot give from an empty cup, and you cannot guide others if you've lost yourself. You begin to look back at the old version of you, the one who chased approval, who argued to be understood, who filled every silence with noise, and you feel gratitude. Not judgment, but gratitude. Because without that version of you, you would never have learned the value of stillness. You realize that the pain, the mistakes, the restlessness, they were all preparing you for this calm. You needed the noise to recognize the beauty of quiet. And as you continue, you begin to build a rhythm, a quiet, powerful rhythm of progress. Each day becomes a step forward, each moment of stillness a reset. You no longer measure success by how quickly things happen, but by how intentionally you move. You've learned that rushing leads to mistakes, and noise leads to confusion, but steady, quiet focus, it leads to mastery, and eventually your results become undeniable, People start to notice that something about you has changed, not because you've said it, but because they can feel it. You radiate a kind of calm certainty that can't be faked. You've stopped competing, yet you keep winning. You've stopped chasing, yet you keep attracting. And those who once underestimated your silence begin to understand that it was never weakness, it was strategy. You find that the less you speak of your plans, the more you accomplish them. The less you seek validation, the more self-assured you become. You realize that the only person you ever needed to prove anything to was yourself. Every quiet day of work, every unseen effort, every moment you chose peace over reaction, it all built you into someone unrecognizable from who you once were. And somewhere along the way, without even trying to announce it, your life changes. Not because of luck or noise or approval, but because of quiet, consistent focus. You've learned to move with intention, to think with clarity, and to live with purpose. You've learned that silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. And that when you focus on yourself and stay quiet long enough, everything around you starts to rise to meet the person you've become. As your life continues to evolve in this quiet strength, you begin to notice that the way you experience time changes. The days that once felt rushed and chaotic now feel purposeful, deliberate. You're no longer racing against time, you're working with it. You understand that every hour spent in alignment is far more valuable than a day spent in distraction. You begin to realize that the slower you move internally, the faster you progress externally, because calmness breeds precision, and precision builds results. You see, most people live their lives like a storm, scattered energy, constant noise, rushing from one task to another, never stopping to think, never pausing to breathe. But when you focus on yourself and learn to stay quiet, you become like a river. You flow, you move with direction and depth. You don't need to crash to make progress. You simply continue forward with unwavering steadiness, and that quiet consistency over time carves mountains and reshapes your entire life. You begin to see that what once distracted you no longer holds power. The opinions, the criticism, the misunderstanding, they fade into the background because your focus is too strong to be shaken. You no longer respond to noise because you've outgrown it. You start to understand that not every voice deserves your attention, not every situation deserves your presence, and not every opportunity deserves your energy. Selectivity becomes your strength. In your silence, you find clarity. You begin to understand your priorities, what truly matters and what never did. You learn that peace is not found in doing more, but in doing what's right. You discover that life doesn't reward the busy, it rewards the focused. And that every time you direct your energy toward what truly matters, the unnecessary falls away on its own. You also begin to notice that your confidence no longer comes from what you achieve, but from who you are becoming. You stop identifying with titles, possessions, or recognition. You start identifying with growth, resilience, and inner peace. You realize that the real success isn't measured in applause, but in awareness, the awareness that you are walking in the direction of your highest potential, even if no one else can see it yet. As you walk further down this path, you'll find that silence sharpens not only your focus, but your perception of truth. You start to see through illusion, the illusion of overnight success, of constant validation, of superficial happiness. You begin to recognize authenticity in others and in yourself. You start valuing the real over the loud, the meaningful over the popular. You stop chasing trends and start building timeless principles within you. And soon you realize something extraordinary. You no longer react to life, you create it. You no longer wait for things to happen. You make them happen through quiet persistence. You no longer depend on external motivation. You are guided by inner conviction. That is the transformation that happens when you focus on yourself and stay quiet. You become self-directed. You no longer need to be pushed. You are pulled by vision. There's a kind of peace that settles in when you finally understand this. You stop competing with others because you see that your journey is not a race, it's a revelation. You stop rushing to catch up because you realize there is nothing to catch up to. You are exactly where you need to be, learning exactly what you need to learn. You begin to see that every detour had purpose, every delay had meaning, and every moment of solitude was preparing you for something greater. When you live with that awareness, the pressure begins to fade. You no longer live to prove anything. You live to express something the best within you, and that expression doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be true. You stop seeking attention and start offering value. You stop demanding recognition and start creating impact. You begin to find fulfillment not in being noticed, but in knowing you're walking in alignment with what you were meant to do. The quiet life teaches you that discipline is love for your future self, love for your potential, love for the life you're building. Every act of self-control becomes an act of self-respect. Every time you choose peace over drama, focus over distraction, purpose over pleasure, you reinforce your strength. You start to see that real success is simply the accumulation of small, wise choices made consistently over time. And because you no longer waste energy on unnecessary noise, you have more to give to what matters most. Your creativity deepens, your relationships improve, your mind becomes clearer. You begin to notice beauty in the smallest details, wisdom in simple moments, joy in quiet progress. You learn that happiness isn't found in grand gestures, but in the quiet contentment of knowing you're becoming who you were always meant to be. As you grow more centered, you also develop a new relationship with failure. You stop fearing it because you understand that it's not a sign of weakness, but a tool for refinement. Failure becomes feedback, not defeat. You see that every setback has something to teach you, something you could only learn through experience. And because you're focused inward, you're able to extract the lesson instead of collapsing under the weight of the mistake. You no longer dwell on what went wrong. You study it, correct it, and move forward quietly, but with purpose. In that stillness, your courage grows, not the kind of courage that shouts or demands attention, but the quiet kind, the kind that keeps going after rejection, that keeps believing when there's no applause, that keeps trusting the process when no one else does. This is the courage that builds legacies, the courage that endures storms without losing faith in the sunrise that follows. And the more you practice this quiet discipline, the more unstoppable you become, not because everything suddenly becomes easy, but because nothing can break your focus anymore. You have learned to control the only thing you ever truly could, yourself, and once you've mastered that, there is nothing external that can hold power over you. You'll notice that your energy becomes sacred. You no longer waste it explaining, arguing, defending, or doubting. You simply do, you act, you move, you build. Your results become your response, your progress becomes your proof, and your silence becomes your strength. There's a calm certainty that comes from knowing you don't need to announce every step because you trust where you're going. As time passes, you'll begin to appreciate solitude more than ever before. Not because you wish to escape people, but because solitude has become your sanctuary, the place where you realign, re-energize, and reconnect with yourself. You realize that silence isn't the absence of life. It's where life speaks most clearly. It's in the stillness that new ideas emerge, clarity returns, and strength is restored. You start living from a deeper place, a place of purpose instead of impulse, of conviction instead of confusion. You no longer chase outcomes, you cultivate them. You no longer seek shortcuts, you build the long road, because you understand that what's built quietly lasts the longest. The same calm energy that once made you feel unseen now makes you unshakable. And without even realizing it, your silence becomes your message. It tells the world that you've evolved beyond noise, beyond validation, beyond fear. It tells the world that you've found your rhythm, that quiet, powerful rhythm of progress that no one can disrupt. You become living proof that transformation doesn't always make sound. Sometimes it just radiates. You will inspire others without even trying. They'll see your peace and wonder how you found it. They'll feel your strength and want to know how you built it. They'll notice your focus and wish they had it. But they won't understand that it didn't come from anything external. It came from silence, from discipline, from the decision to turn inward and trust yourself completely. And as your life expands, as your confidence deepens, as your peace solidifies, you'll look back and realize that every quiet moment was worth it. Every time you stayed silent instead of reacting, every time you focused instead of comparing, every time you kept going when no one noticed, it all mattered. Every small act of stillness was preparing you for the clarity and strength you now live with. You begin to understand that success, in its truest form, is not loud, chaotic, or rushed. It's calm, deliberate, and earned. It doesn't scream for attention. It commands respect through results. And that is the kind of success that lasts, the kind built in silence, with patience, persistence, and focus. And now, you no longer search for peace in the world because you've found it within. You no longer chase success because you're already walking in it. You've learned that when you focus on yourself and stay quiet, life doesn't just change, it aligns, it expands, and it begins to reflect the calm strength you've built inside.